Take a moment right now and look at your hand. Look at the color of your skin. Whether it's dark brown, light beige, golden tan, or pale pink, you're looking at millions of years of human history. You're seeing the result of countless generations adapting to sunlight, moving across continents, surviving ice ages and droughts. Your skin color is a story written in melanin, passed down through time. But here's what might surprise you. The question isn't really when humans first developed dark skin. The truth is far more interesting than that. Dark skin wasn't something humans developed. Dark skin is what humans started with. It's our original color, our default setting. For most of human existence, nearly everyone on Earth had dark brown skin. The real question is different. The question that scientists have spent decades trying to answer is this: when and why did some humans lose their dark skin? Why did some populations become lighter? And what can this tell us about who we are? Tonight, we're going on a journey that spans 2 million years. We'll travel from the hot grasslands of ancient Africa to the cold, dim forests of Ice Age Europe. We'll explore caves and examine bones. We'll look at DNA and study the sun itself. We'll meet our ancestors as they were, living their daily lives under different skies. If you drift off during this journey, that's exactly what this is for. Whether you stay awake for all of it or fall asleep halfway through, you'll discover something profound about yourself. Because this isn't just ancient history. This is your history. This is the story of how humans became every color we are today, and why that happened. Let your body settle into comfort. Adjust your pillow. Take a slow breath. We're about to step back in time, to a world before cities, before agriculture, before anyone had ever wondered why people looked different from each other. We're going back to the beginning, to understand something that touches every person alive today. The story begins in Africa, as all human stories do, under a brilliant and unforgiving sun. 2 million years ago, there were no countries, no borders, no different races of humans. There was just Africa, vast and varied, and creatures that were slowly, gradually becoming human. They walked upright. They made simple tools. They had larger brains than any other ape. And they had dark skin. Very dark skin. Every single one of them. Picture the Great Rift Valley in East Africa. This is where much of early human evolution happened. The landscape stretched for hundreds of miles, a mix of grasslands, scattered trees, rivers, and volcanic mountains. The sun beat down every day, strong and direct. The UV radiation at these latitudes is intense. It was then and it still is now. Our early ancestors spent their days in this environment. They weren't covered in thick body hair like earlier apes. Somewhere along the evolutionary path, humans lost most of their body fur. This was actually an advantage. It helped them cool down through sweating. They could hunt during the hot midday hours when other predators rested. They could outlast their prey by simply running after it until it collapsed from heat exhaustion. But losing fur created a problem. Naked skin exposed to intense UV radiation faces serious dangers. The ultraviolet rays from the sun can destroy folate, a B vitamin that's essential for DNA synthesis and cell division. Without enough folate, reproductive problems arise. Birth defects increase. Fertility drops. For a species trying to survive and reproduce, this is catastrophic. The solution evolution provided was melanin. Specifically, eumelanin, the dark brown or black pigment that sits in the outer layer of skin. Melanin acts like a natural sunscreen. It absorbs UV radiation before that radiation can penetrate deeper into the skin and damage cells. It protects folate levels. It reduces the risk of skin cancers. It allows humans to thrive under the African sun. The evidence for this is everywhere we look. Every early human fossil we found in Africa shows anatomical features consistent with dark skin. More importantly, when scientists study the genetics of modern African populations, they find that the genes for dark skin pigmentation are ancient. They've been there for a very long time. How long exactly? The current scientific consensus suggests that by the time our species, Homo sapiens, emerged around 300,000 years ago, we already had dark skin. But it goes back further than that. Our earlier ancestors, like Homo erectus who lived 1.9 million years ago, almost certainly had dark skin too. As soon as humans lost their body hair, they needed dark skin to survive in equatorial Africa. Imagine being one of these early humans. You wake as the sky begins to lighten, the stars fading into deep blue. The air is cool now, but you know that in a few hours it will be hot. You're part of a small group, maybe 20 or 30 people, moving through the landscape. You know every water source, every tree that bears fruit, every place where animals gather. Your skin is dark brown, rich like the earth after rain. You've never thought about it because everyone you've ever seen looks like you. The concept of different skin colors doesn't exist. How could it? You've never encountered anything else. You spend your morning foraging, looking for roots and tubers, collecting nuts, finding bird eggs. The sun climbs higher. Its heat presses down on you, but your skin handles it. You sweat, you seek shade during the hottest hours, but you're built for this environment. Your ancestors have lived here for hundreds of thousands of years. You are perfectly adapted. In the afternoon, some of the group tracks an antelope. The hunt is long, a slow pursuit that lasts hours. The animal runs, then walks, then runs again. But your group keeps following, walking steadily, persistently. Your body can regulate heat better than the antelope's can. Eventually, the animal can no longer run. You've outlasted it. As evening comes, you gather with your group. You share food. Children play in the fading light. Someone tends to a fire, one of humanity's greatest discoveries. The sky turns orange, then purple, then black. Stars emerge, more stars than you can count. You sleep under them, surrounded by your family, in the place where humanity began. This was life for humans for most of our existence. Life in Africa. Life with dark skin. Life that worked, that sustained us, that allowed us to grow in numbers and intelligence. We thrived. We evolved. We became more sophisticated, more creative, more capable. And then, some of us started to leave. Before we follow those first migrants out of Africa, let's understand exactly what skin color is and how it works. Because once you understand the mechanism, the whole story of human pigmentation makes more sense. Your skin has multiple layers. The outermost layer, the one you see and touch, is called the epidermis. Within the epidermis are special cells called melanocytes. These cells produce melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color. There are actually different types of melanin. Eumelanin is brown or black. Pheomelanin is red or yellow. The amount and type of melanin your skin produces determines your skin color. More eumelanin means darker skin. Less eumelanin means lighter skin. Some pheomelanin adds reddish or golden tones. Here's something fascinating. All humans have roughly the same number of melanocytes. A person with very dark skin and a person with very pale skin have about the same number of these pigment-producing cells. The difference isn't in how many melanocytes you have. The difference is in how active they are, how much melanin they produce, and what type of melanin they make. This is controlled by genes, and we'll talk more about those specific genes later. But for now, understand that skin color is genetic, inherited from your parents, determined by multiple genes working together. It's not influenced by sun exposure in the long-term sense, though your skin can tan temporarily as a response to UV radiation. Melanin does more than just add color. It has a job to do. When UV radiation from the sun hits your skin, melanin absorbs it. Think of melanin as tiny umbrellas inside your skin cells, blocking harmful rays. The more melanin you have, the more protection you have. This protection is crucial for two important biochemical reasons. First, UV radiation can break down folate, also called vitamin B9. Folate is essential for DNA synthesis and repair. It's especially critical during pregnancy for proper fetal development. Low folate levels can lead to neural tube defects in babies, like spina bifida. For women of childbearing age, maintaining folate levels is literally a matter of life and death for the next generation. Second, UV radiation can directly damage DNA in skin cells. This damage can lead to mutations, and mutations can lead to cancer. Melanin reduces this DNA damage significantly. In populations living under intense sun, dark skin provides essential protection against skin cancers. But here's where it gets complicated. where evolution had to solve a delicate puzzle. UV radiation isn't just harmful. It's also necessary. Your body needs UV radiation to produce vitamin D. When UVB rays hit your skin, they trigger a chemical reaction that converts a cholesterol-like compound into vitamin D3. This vitamin is crucial for calcium absorption, bone health, immune function, and many other biological processes. So the sun presents humans with a paradox. Too much UV radiation destroys folate and damages DNA. Too little UV radiation prevents vitamin D synthesis. The amount of melanin in your skin determines how you navigate this paradox. In equatorial regions, where the sun is strong year-round, dark skin is ideal. It protects folate and prevents DNA damage, while still allowing enough UV radiation through to make sufficient vitamin D. The sun is so strong in these regions that even heavily pigmented skin can produce plenty of vitamin D. But what happens when humans move to regions where the sun is weaker? Where winter days are short and the sun stays low on the horizon? Where thick clouds often block the sky? In these environments, dark skin might provide more protection than necessary, while making it difficult to produce enough vitamin D. This is where evolution had to make adjustments. This is why some human populations gradually lost their dark pigmentation. Not because dark skin was bad, but because in certain environments, lighter skin was advantageous. It was a trade-off, a balancing act between too much protection and not enough vitamin D. Scientists call this the vitamin D hypothesis for the evolution of light skin. It's well supported by evidence, though it's not the only factor. Climate, diet, and other selective pressures also played roles. Evolution is rarely simple, rarely about just one thing. Take a moment to think about this. Your skin color, whatever it is, represents an ancient compromise between protection from the sun and production of vitamin D. It represents thousands of generations of ancestors living in specific environments, their bodies slowly adjusting to the light conditions of their particular part of the world. You carry this adaptation with you every day. When you step outside, your skin is responding to light the way evolution shaped it to respond. If your ancestors spent the last 50,000 years in Northern Europe, your skin might be pale, efficient at capturing what little UV radiation is available. If your ancestors stayed in tropical Africa, your skin might be very dark, efficiently protecting against intense sun. Neither is better. Neither is worse. They're just different solutions to different environmental challenges. They're evidence of human adaptability, of our species' ability to survive and thrive in an incredible variety of climates and conditions. Now, let's follow the journey that made these different adaptations necessary. Let's watch as the first humans left Africa and stepped into a world of new light, new challenges, and new evolutionary pressures. Around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. A small group of Homo sapiens left Africa. They crossed into the Middle East, probably through the Sinai Peninsula or across the narrow strait at the southern end of the Red Sea. They were dark-skinned people, carrying all the genetic adaptations of their African homeland. Why did they leave? We don't know for certain. Maybe they were following animal herds. Maybe population pressure pushed them into new territories. Maybe curiosity drove them, or necessity, or simply the human tendency to wonder what's over the next hill. Whatever the reason, they went. And they survived. These weren't the first humans to leave Africa. Homo erectus had left much earlier, around 1.9 million years ago, spreading across Asia and Europe. But those earlier migrations didn't lead to modern human populations outside Africa. Those populations went extinct. The migration we're talking about now, the one around 70,000 years ago, is different. This is the one that succeeded. Every non-African population alive today descends from this single migration event. The migrants moved slowly, over many generations. They didn't wake up one morning in Africa and go to sleep in China. They moved gradually, following coastlines, river valleys, spreading through the Middle East into South Asia, then into East Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia. Other groups moved north into Central Asia and eventually Europe. At first, their dark skin was still appropriate. The Middle East is sunny. South Asia is tropical in many areas. These weren't environments that required dramatic changes in pigmentation. But as some groups moved further north, as they entered temperate and eventually subarctic regions, the environmental pressures began to shift. Imagine being part of a group that has moved into what is now Central Asia, perhaps 50,000 years ago. You're many generations removed from your African ancestors, but you still look largely like them. Your skin is still dark brown. You've learned to make warmer clothing from animal skins. You've adapted your hunting strategies to different prey animals. You've learned which new plants are edible, which are poisonous. But the sun here is different. It's not just that winter exists, something your ancestors never experienced. It's that even in summer, the sun stays lower in the sky. It passes through more atmosphere before reaching you. The UV radiation is less intense. And in winter, the days are short. Very short. There are weeks when you barely see the sun at all. You don't notice the problem immediately. It's not dramatic. You don't wake up one day feeling different. But over time, over generations, a pattern emerges. Some people seem to have weaker bones. Some women have more difficulties with pregnancy. Some children aren't as healthy as they should be. The cause is vitamin D deficiency, though of course you have no way of knowing that. This is where natural selection begins its quiet work. It's not that dark-skinned people couldn't survive in northern regions. They could and they did. But there was a subtle advantage for individuals who, through random genetic mutation, had slightly lighter skin. These individuals could produce vitamin D more efficiently in low UV environments. They were, on average, slightly healthier. Their children were slightly more likely to survive and reproduce. Over hundreds and thousands of generations, this slight advantage added up. The frequency of genes for lighter skin pigmentation gradually increased in populations living in northern regions. Meanwhile, populations that stayed in tropical regions maintained their dark skin, because their dark skin remained advantageous. This process was slow. Incredibly slow by human perception. It took thousands of years, perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 years, for significant skin color changes to occur in different populations. No one alive during this process would have noticed it happening. The change was too gradual, spread across too many generations. But the genetic evidence shows it happened. Different populations, living in different environments, underwent parallel evolution in skin pigmentation. Europeans became lighter in one way, using one set of genetic changes. East Asians became lighter in a different way, using different genetic changes. The same outcome, lighter skin, achieved through different evolutionary paths. This is called convergent evolution, and it's powerful evidence that skin color is truly an adaptation to UV radiation levels. Here's something worth contemplating as you settle deeper into rest. The humans who left Africa 70,000 years ago were pioneers, even if they didn't know it. They were walking into completely unknown territory, facing challenges no human had ever faced before. They had to learn new skills, adapt to new foods, survive new climates. And their bodies, over thousands of years, adapted too. Your ancestors were among them, no matter where you're from. Everyone alive today descends from that small founding population that left Africa. We're all related, all connected through that ancient migration. The differences we see between populations, including skin color, arose later, as groups separated and adapted to different environments. Think about that. The person next to you, or the person you passed on the street today, or someone on the other side of the world, they're your cousin. Distant, separated by hundreds of generations. But family nonetheless. We're one species, one family tree, with African roots and branches that spread across the globe. The migrants kept moving, kept adapting. Some reached Europe, where they would encounter another human species, the Neanderthals. Some reached the frozen north of Siberia, developing adaptations to extreme cold. Some crossed land bridges to reach the Americas. Some navigated the ocean to reach remote islands. Everywhere humans went, their bodies responded to local conditions. And nowhere was this response more visible than in skin color, that trait we can all see, that marker of ancestry and adaptation, that reminder of our shared journey out of Africa and into every corner of Earth. Let's slow down now and really understand how the change happened. How does a population go from dark-skinned to light-skinned over thousands of years? What does this process actually look like at the level of individuals, families, communities? First, understand that evolution doesn't have a goal. It's not trying to make light skin. It's not trying to do anything. Evolution is simply the result of natural selection acting on random genetic variation. Mutations happen constantly, randomly. Most mutations do nothing noticeable. Some are harmful. A few, in certain environments, are beneficial. In northern latitudes, a mutation that reduced melanin production was beneficial. Not hugely beneficial. Not the difference between dying young and living long. Just slightly beneficial. Maybe it increased vitamin D production enough that bones were a bit stronger. Maybe it reduced the risk of vitamin D deficiency during long winters. Maybe it improved pregnancy outcomes just a little bit. This small advantage meant that individuals with lighter skin were slightly more likely to survive and have children. And those children inherited the genes for lighter skin. Over many generations, the frequency of these genes increased in the population. More and more people were born with lighter skin. Eventually, light skin became the norm rather than the exception. But this didn't happen uniformly. Different populations were isolated from each other, separated by mountains, deserts, seas. Each population accumulated different mutations. Each followed a slightly different evolutionary path. In Europe, the main genes involved in lightening skin were SLC24A5, SLC45A2, and several others. Mutations in these genes reduce the production or distribution of melanin. The SLC24A5 gene mutation, in particular, is found in almost all Europeans and is responsible for a significant portion of their light skin. This mutation probably arose around 20,000 to 30,000 years ago, though the exact timing is debated. In East Asia, different genes were involved. The main ones include OCA2 and genes affecting the MC1R pathway, but through different mutations than in Europeans. East Asians evolved lighter skin independently through their own genetic changes. This is why European light skin and East Asian light skin aren't exactly the same. They have different undertones, different characteristics. They evolved separately. What's fascinating is that this happened relatively recently in evolutionary terms. The oldest Homo sapiens fossils are 300,000 years old. But the genetic changes for light skin in non-African populations are mostly less than 30,000 years old. Some might be even more recent than that. This means that for the vast majority of human existence, everyone was dark-skinned. Light skin is a recent innovation, a new adaptation to new circumstances. Picture a community in Ice Age Europe, maybe 15,000 years ago. The glaciers have retreated somewhat, but it's still cold. Your group lives in a river valley, hunting reindeer and mammoth, gathering whatever plant foods are available, fishing in the cold streams. Most people in your community still have relatively dark skin, olive or brown, because the genetic changes for very pale skin haven't fully spread through the population yet. But some individuals are noticeably lighter than others. These individuals, by chance, inherited the new mutations that reduce melanin production. You wouldn't think of it as evolution happening. You just notice that people look different. Some families have lighter children. Some individuals have freckles, or red hair, or skin that burns easily in the brief summer sun. There's variation, diversity within your small community. The lighter-skinned individuals have a slight advantage during the long winters. They produce vitamin D more efficiently with the limited sun exposure. Over your lifetime, you might notice that they seem generally healthy, that their children thrive. But it's subtle, not obvious, not dramatic. Over hundreds of generations, though, the pattern continues. The genes for lighter skin become more common. The average skin tone of the population gradually shifts. By 10,000 years ago, many European populations have significantly lighter skin than their ancestors 20,000 years earlier. The process continues right up to recent historical times. Here's something that might surprise you. The shift to light skin in Europeans wasn't complete until relatively recently. Genetic studies of ancient DNA from European hunter-gatherers show that some populations 10,000 years ago still had fairly dark skin. The spread of agriculture from the Middle East brought new populations into Europe, and these populations carried different combinations of skin color genes. The mixing of these groups, and continued selection for lighter skin, eventually produced the very pale skin common in Northern Europeans today. This means that the pale skin of Scandinavia, Britain, or Ireland might be less than 10,000 years old, perhaps as recent as 5,000 to 7,000 years ago in some populations. In evolutionary terms, this is the blink of an eye. This is yesterday. Let yourself absorb this information as you rest. The physical differences between human populations are very recent, very new. For most of human history, we all looked similar. The diversity we see today arose quickly, in response to environmental pressures, through the normal process of evolution that affects all living things. There's no deep, ancient divide between human groups. There are only recent adaptations, superficial changes, variations on a single theme. We're all so closely related that our differences are literally skin deep. The story gets more complex, though, because not all populations followed the simple pattern of dark skin in the tropics, light skin in the north. Some populations challenge our expectations and teach us that evolution is full of surprises. Now we need to look more closely at the biological mechanism driving these changes. Why does vitamin D matter so much? What happens when you don't have enough? And what happens when UV radiation is too intense? Let's start with vitamin D. This molecule, sometimes called the sunshine vitamin, is actually more like a hormone. It affects almost every system in your body. Your bones need it to absorb calcium properly. Without adequate vitamin D, bones become soft, weak, prone to fractures. In children, severe vitamin D deficiency causes rickets, a disease that deforms growing bones. In adults, it causes osteomalacia, a painful softening of the bones. But vitamin D does much more than support bones. It regulates your immune system, influences cell growth, reduces inflammation, affects muscle function, and plays roles in cardiovascular health and even mood. Low vitamin D levels are associated with increased risk of various diseases, from multiple sclerosis to certain cancers. Your body can get vitamin D from food. Fatty fish like salmon, egg yolks, and liver contain some. But for most of human history, the primary source was synthesis in the skin. When UVB radiation hits your skin, it converts 7-dehydrocholesterol into pre-vitamin D3, which then becomes vitamin D3. This compound travels to the liver and kidneys, where it's converted into the active form of vitamin D that your body can use. The amount of vitamin D your skin can produce depends on several factors. The intensity of UVB radiation, the time of year and day, your latitude, how much of your skin is exposed, and crucially your skin color. Melanin blocks UVB radiation. This is its job, to protect you from sun damage. But in blocking UVB, melanin also reduces vitamin D synthesis. Dark skin in a sunny environment is fine. There's plenty of UVB getting through. But dark skin in a low UV environment can make it difficult to produce enough vitamin D. This is why people with dark skin living in northern countries today often need to be careful about vitamin D levels. They might need dietary supplements, especially in winter. Their skin is adapted for sunny Africa, but they're living in cloudy Britain or Sweden or Canada. The mismatch creates a vulnerability. For ancient populations moving into northern regions, this created evolutionary pressure. Individuals whose random genetic mutations made their skin slightly lighter had an advantage. They could produce vitamin D more efficiently. They were less likely to suffer from deficiency diseases. Their children were more likely to be healthy and survive to reproduce. But let's look at the other side of the equation. What happens with too much UV radiation? In tropical regions, the sun delivers intense UVB and UVA radiation year-round. Without protection, this causes immediate problems. Sunburn is the obvious one. Severe sunburn is painful, debilitating, increases infection risk. But the deeper problem is what UV radiation does inside your cells. UV radiation causes DNA mutations. It creates thymine dimers, abnormal bonds between adjacent thymine bases in DNA. These mutations can disrupt genes, including genes that control cell division. If mutations occur in the wrong genes, cells can become cancerous. Skin cancer is the direct result of UV-induced DNA damage. Now, skin cancer might not seem like a strong evolutionary pressure. Most skin cancers develop later in life, after reproductive years are over. From an evolutionary perspective, what happens after you've reproduced doesn't matter as much. But some skin cancers are aggressive and can occur in younger people. And there's another issue: aesthetic damage. Severe sun damage makes skin age prematurely. It causes wrinkles, spots, toughening. In a young person, this might affect mate selection. If sun-damaged skin made someone less attractive as a potential partner, that's evolutionary pressure. Beauty standards are culturally variable, but health and youth are nearly universally attractive traits. More importantly, though, is the folate issue. UV radiation breaks down folate, vitamin B9. Folate is absolutely critical for DNA synthesis and cell division. During pregnancy, the developing fetus needs enormous amounts of folate. Inadequate folate during early pregnancy causes neural tube defects, serious birth defects affecting the brain and spine. A pregnant woman with dark skin has better protection for her folate levels. The melanin in her skin shields the folate in her blood from UV radiation. Her baby has a better chance of developing normally. In a sunny environment, this is a significant advantage. So here's the paradox evolution had to solve. UV radiation destroys folate, which you need for reproduction. But UV radiation creates vitamin D, which you also need for health. Too much melanin protects folate but prevents vitamin D synthesis. Too little melanin allows vitamin D synthesis but fails to protect folate. The solution is elegant. Match your melanin level to your UV exposure. In high UV environments, have dark skin. In low UV environments, have light skin. Each population over thousands of years evolved the melanin level appropriate for their latitude. This is why skin color correlates with latitude. The further from the equator you go, the lighter skin tends to become. It's not a perfect correlation. Diet, clothing, culture, and recent migrations complicate the pattern. But the general trend is clear and makes perfect evolutionary sense. Take a moment to appreciate the complexity here. Your body is balancing multiple biochemical needs: sun protection, vitamin production, folate preservation, DNA repair, immune function. All of these systems interact, all are affected by sunlight, all influenced by how much melanin sits in your skin. You are a solution to an ancient problem. Your skin color represents thousands of generations of trial and error, of natural selection finding the balance point between too much sun and too little. It's not random. It's not meaningless. It's a precisely calibrated adaptation to the amount of sunlight your ancestors experienced. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the long chain of your ancestors, stretching back thousands of years. Each one living under certain skies, experiencing certain amounts of sun. Each generation slightly different from the last, their bodies slowly adjusting to their environment. And finally, the latest link in that chain, carrying the adaptations that allowed all those ancestors to survive, to thrive, to pass their genes forward through time until they reached you. The story of skin color isn't always simple. Not every population fits neatly into the pattern of light skin in the north and dark skin in the south. Some groups challenge our expectations and reveal that evolution is more complex and interesting than any simple rule. Let's talk about some of these populations. Let's explore the exceptions that help us understand the full picture. Consider the Inuit people of the Arctic. They live in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, the Arctic Circle. Long, dark winters where the sun barely rises. You'd expect, based on the vitamin D hypothesis, that the Inuit would have very pale skin. If anyone needed efficient vitamin D synthesis, it would be people living in near darkness for months at a time. But the Inuit don't have very pale skin. Their skin is medium brown, more pigmented than Europeans, though lighter than equatorial Africans. But the answer lies in their diet. The Inuit traditionally ate a diet rich in fatty fish, seal meat, whale blubber, and other marine mammals. These foods are extraordinarily high in vitamin D. The Inuit got their vitamin D from food, not from sun exposure. When your diet provides abundant vitamin D, the evolutionary pressure to lighten skin is reduced. The Inuit didn't need pale skin because they had another solution to the vitamin D problem. Their adaptation was cultural and dietary rather than genetic and physiological. This tells us something important. Evolution doesn't work in isolation. It interacts with culture, with technology, with behavior. If a population solves an environmental challenge through cultural means, genetic evolution may not be necessary. Now consider the indigenous peoples of Tasmania, the island south of Australia. Tasmania is at a relatively high latitude, around 42 degrees south. It has cool, often cloudy weather. Limited sun exposure, especially in winter. You might expect Tasmanians to have evolved lighter skin, similar to Europeans at comparable latitudes in the northern hemisphere. But the Tasmanians had dark skin when Europeans first encountered them in the 1800s. Why didn't they lighten? The answer might be time. The Tasmanians' ancestors arrived in Australia around 50,000 years ago and reached Tasmania around 40,000 years ago, when lower sea levels connected it to the mainland. That seems like a long time, but it might not have been long enough for significant lightening to occur. Evolution takes time. Thousands of years, many generations. If the selection pressure isn't extremely strong, change happens slowly. The Tasmanians may have been in the process of evolving lighter skin, but the process was incomplete when their population was devastated by European colonization in the 1800s. Or perhaps their diet, rich in fish and shellfish, provided enough vitamin D that selection for lighter skin wasn't strong. Or perhaps other genetic factors were at play. The honest answer is that we're not entirely sure. Human evolution is complex, and we're still learning. Let's look at another fascinating case: the people of Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. These regions are tropical with intense sun exposure. Most populations in tropical regions have dark brown or black skin. But some groups in Papua New Guinea and neighboring islands have very dark skin, among the darkest in the world, achieved through different genetic mechanisms than African dark skin. Genetic studies have shown that some Melanesian populations have a unique variant of the TYRP1 gene that produces extremely dark pigmentation. This variant is different from the genes that produce dark skin in Africans. It's an example of convergent evolution, different genetic solutions to the same environmental challenge. Even more interesting, some Melanesian populations have blonde hair, especially in children. Blonde hair in dark-skinned people. This trait is caused by a different gene variant, specific to this region, that reduces pigment in hair but not in skin. It's a reminder that traits don't always come in the combinations we expect. Evolution can mix and match in surprising ways. The San people of southern Africa offer another interesting case. The San, also called Bushmen, are one of the oldest populations in the world. Genetic studies suggest they've lived in southern Africa for over 100,000 years, possibly longer. They have lighter skin than many other African populations, despite living at fairly low latitudes where sun is strong. But part of the answer may be that southern Africa has somewhat higher elevation and different climate patterns than equatorial Africa. Another factor may be genetic drift, random changes in gene frequencies in small populations. The San population has historically been relatively small, and in small populations, genetic drift can have significant effects. Or perhaps there are factors we haven't identified yet. Selection pressures we don't fully understand. The San teach us humility, reminding us that we don't have all the answers yet. Let's also consider populations that have recently moved to new environments. Indian populations in the Caribbean, for example. Chinese populations in Southeast Asia. European populations in Australia. These groups haven't had time to evolve new skin colors adapted to their new homes. They're living in UV environments their skin isn't optimized for. This creates health challenges. Light-skinned Australians of European descent have high rates of skin cancer because their skin didn't evolve for intense Australian sun. Dark-skinned immigrants to northern countries often need vitamin D supplements because their skin is too efficient at blocking the limited UV radiation. These modern mismatches between skin color and environment teach us something important. Skin color really is an adaptation to UV radiation. When there's a mismatch, there are health consequences. The correlation between latitude and skin color isn't coincidence or social construct. It's biology, evolution, adaptation. As you lie there, perhaps beginning to feel sleep approaching, think about the diversity of human populations. Think about how different groups found different solutions to similar problems. How some evolved genetically while others adapted culturally. How evolution can produce the same outcome through different paths, or different outcomes in similar environments. We are one species, but we're a species with remarkable variation. That variation is meaningful, functional, shaped by thousands of years of life in specific places under specific skies. It's evidence of human adaptability, of our ability to survive everywhere from the Arctic to the tropics, from deserts to rainforests to tiny islands in vast oceans. And yet, despite this variation, we're still fundamentally the same. The differences between populations are superficial, recent, easily explained by environmental adaptation. Under the skin, we're identical. Same organs, same bones, same brains. One species, one family, painted in different shades by the sun. How do scientists know all of this? How can we possibly understand events that happened thousands or millions of years ago? No one was there taking notes. No one recorded the first human to have slightly lighter skin, or the environmental pressures that favored that change. So how do we know? The answer is evidence. Multiple types of evidence from different scientific fields, all pointing to the same conclusions. Let's explore these methods, slowly and clearly, so you understand exactly how science reconstructs the past. First, there's the study of modern populations. Scientists examine skin color in populations around the world and look for patterns. They measure melanin levels, using instruments called reflectance spectrophotometers that shine light on skin and measure how much is reflected versus absorbed. Dark skin absorbs more light. Light skin reflects more. When you map skin color against latitude, a clear pattern emerges. Populations near the equator have darker skin. Populations far from the equator have lighter skin. There are exceptions, like the Inuit we discussed, but the overall trend is unmistakable. This pattern suggests that skin color is related to sunlight, to UV radiation, which is more intense at the equator and weaker at higher latitudes. But correlation doesn't prove causation. Maybe the pattern is coincidence. Maybe skin color is related to something else. This is where other types of evidence become crucial. Scientists study the effects of UV radiation on human biology. They've conducted experiments showing that UV radiation destroys folate. They've demonstrated that UV triggers vitamin D synthesis in skin. They've documented how melanin absorbs UV radiation, protecting deeper skin layers. These laboratory findings explain why skin color would matter, why it would be subject to natural selection. Then there's comparative biology. Scientists look at other species, at animals that live in different latitudes, to see if they show similar patterns. And many do. Many mammals, birds, and reptiles have darker coloration in sunny regions and lighter coloration in areas with less sun. This pattern, seen across many species, suggests a fundamental biological principle at work. Pigmentation responds to light exposure across the animal kingdom. But perhaps the most powerful evidence comes from genetics. The human genome contains roughly 20,000 genes, and within those genes are millions of small variations called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. By studying SNPs in different populations, scientists can identify which genes vary in ways that affect skin color. Several genes have been identified that significantly influence pigmentation. The SLC24A5 gene affects the maturation of melanosomes, the structures that contain melanin. A particular variant of this gene is found in about 99% of Europeans but is rare in Africans. This variant reduces melanin production, leading to lighter skin. Other important genes include SLC45A2, TYR, OCA2, HERC2, IRF4, MC1R, and several others. Each contributes to the overall phenotype, the visible result we call skin color. Some genes have major effects, others have minor effects. Together, they determine where you fall on the spectrum from very dark to very light. What's remarkable is that scientists can date these gene variants. Using molecular clock techniques, comparing the number of genetic differences between variants and assuming a certain rate of mutation, scientists can estimate when different variants arose. This is how we know that the European light skin variants are relatively recent, probably less than 30,000 years old. Ancient DNA provides even more direct evidence. Over the past 2 decades, scientists have developed techniques to extract and analyze DNA from ancient bones and teeth. This is difficult work. DNA degrades over time. Ancient samples are often contaminated with modern DNA or bacterial DNA. But with care and sophisticated techniques, it's possible to sequence the genomes of people who lived thousands of years ago. These ancient genomes are revealing. A man who lived in Britain 10,000 years ago, known as Cheddar Man, had dark skin and blue eyes. His genome shows he had not yet evolved the variants for pale skin common in modern Europeans. A man who lived in Spain 7,000 years ago had a similar profile, dark skin and blue eyes. These findings show that pale skin in Europe is even more recent than previously thought. Conversely, ancient DNA from African populations shows that genes for dark skin are very old, present for tens of thousands of years. This supports the idea that dark skin is the original human condition, with light skin being the derived condition, the evolutionary innovation. Anthropologists also study skeletal remains. While bones don't directly reveal skin color, they can provide indirect evidence. The shape of the nasal cavity, for example, correlates somewhat with climate. Narrow nasal openings are more common in cold, dry climates, while wider openings are more common in hot, humid climates. By examining skulls, anthropologists can make educated guesses about the climate a population lived in, which gives clues about likely skin color. Cultural evidence matters too. Ancient art sometimes depicts people, though interpreting these depictions is tricky. Colors used in art might be symbolic rather than realistic. But in some cases, art provides clues. Egyptian tomb paintings, for example, show different skin tones for different groups, suggesting that the ancient Egyptians were aware of human variation in pigmentation. All of these lines of evidence, genetic, biochemical, comparative, archaeological, come together to tell a coherent story. Dark skin evolved early in human evolution, in Africa, as protection against intense UV radiation. As humans migrated to regions with less UV, some populations evolved lighter skin to facilitate vitamin D production. This happened independently in different populations through different genetic changes. The science isn't perfect. There are still unanswered questions, debates among researchers, aspects we don't fully understand. But the basic outline is clear and well supported. Skin color is an adaptation to UV radiation, shaped by natural selection over thousands of years. As you rest there, maybe beginning to feel the pull of sleep, appreciate the detective work involved in understanding our past. Scientists piecing together clues from bones, genes, geography, chemistry. Building a picture of human history one discovery at a time. Constantly refining, correcting, improving our understanding. This is how knowledge grows. Not through revelation or guesswork, but through careful observation, testing, evidence. The story of human skin color is a triumph of scientific investigation, a testament to human curiosity and ingenuity. We can understand our own origins, our own evolution, through the power of careful thought and systematic study. And what we've learned is beautiful in its simplicity. We are one species, shaped by the environments we inhabit, carrying the marks of our ancestors' journeys in the color of our skin. Science reveals our unity even as it explains our diversity. Let's go deeper into the genetic evidence now. Let's understand exactly what scientists found when they looked at the genes that control skin color and how this genetic information reveals human history. Your genome is like a book, but it's a book that's been edited over thousands of generations. Small changes accumulate, letter by letter. Most changes do nothing noticeable. They sit silently in non-coding regions of DNA or make such subtle alterations that you'd never notice. But some changes matter. Some change the proteins your cells make, altering how your body functions. The genes that affect skin color work mostly by influencing melanin production. They control how many melanosomes each melanocyte produces, how large those melanosomes are, what type of melanin they contain, and how melanin is distributed through the skin. Change these processes, even slightly, and you change skin color. The SLC24A5 gene is one of the most important for European light skin. This gene codes for a protein involved in ion exchange in melanosomes. A single nucleotide change, one DNA letter different, dramatically reduces pigmentation. The variant is called RS1426654, and it's found in about 99% of Europeans, 95% of South Asians, and 30% of Middle Eastern populations, but is nearly absent in Sub-Saharan Africans and East Asians. This distribution tells a story. The variant probably arose in the Middle East or Central Asia, spread into Europe and South Asia, but didn't reach East Asia before populations separated. It's a marker of population history, a genetic breadcrumb trail showing how people moved and mixed. Another important gene is SLC45A2. A variant in this gene also reduces melanin production and is common in Europeans. Together, SLC24A5 and SLC45A2 account for a substantial portion of the difference between European and African skin color. But they're not the only genes involved. Skin color is polygenic, controlled by many genes, each contributing a small effect. In East Asia, the genetic architecture of light skin is different. The OCA2 gene plays a bigger role. Variants of MFSD12 and other genes contribute. These are different genetic changes than in Europeans, which is why East Asian light skin looks different from European light skin. Different undertones, different responses to sun exposure. They're both light skin, but they're not genetically the same. What's fascinating is that scientists can reconstruct the evolutionary history of these variants. They can look at the pattern of genetic variation around a particular variant and infer when it arose and how it spread through populations. When a new beneficial mutation appears, it's initially rare, found in just one person. If it provides an advantage, it increases in frequency over generations. As it spreads, it carries along nearby DNA sequences, creating a distinctive pattern called a selective sweep. Scientists can detect these selective sweeps and use them to identify genes that have been under strong natural selection. The genes for light skin show clear evidence of selective sweeps in European and East Asian populations, but not in African populations. This confirms that light skin was selected for in some environments but not others. It's not random drift. It's adaptation. Scientists can also date these selective sweeps by examining the amount of genetic diversity around the selected variant. The more diversity has accumulated, the older the selective sweep. Using these techniques, researchers estimate that the main variants for European light skin arose somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 years ago. Some may be even more recent. This timeline is surprising to many people. It means that very pale skin, the kind seen in Northern Europeans, is extremely recent. Less than 10,000 years ago, even European populations may have had considerably darker skin than they do today. The iconic pale skin of Scandinavia is a recent adaptation, not an ancient feature. Compare this to dark skin. The genes for dark skin in African populations show no evidence of recent selective sweeps. They're old, stable, maintained by selection for hundreds of thousands of years. This is exactly what you'd expect if dark skin is the original human condition. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not all dark skin is genetically the same. Africans, South Indians, Melanesians, and Australians all have dark skin, but they achieve it through different combinations of gene variants. Dark skin evolved multiple times, in different populations, using different genetic routes. This is another example of convergent evolution. The same environmental pressure, intense UV radiation, led to the same solution, dark skin, but the genetic path to that solution differed. This tells us that there are multiple ways to make dark skin, multiple genetic combinations that produce high melanin levels. Scientists have even identified specific gene variants unique to certain populations. the MFSD12 gene in East Africans, the TRP1 variant in Melanesians. The MC1 are variants in Europeans that produce red hair and very pale skin. Each population has its own genetic story, its own unique evolutionary history. What does this mean for the concept of race? It means that race, as a biological category, doesn't hold up under genetic scrutiny. Skin color varies, yes, but it varies gradually, not in discrete categories. And it varies independently of other traits. You can't predict someone's genetic background from their skin color alone. Two people with dark skin might be more genetically different from each other than either is from a light-skinned person. An African and a Melanesian have dark skin, but they're not closely related. Their dark skin arose independently. Meanwhile, a light-skinned European might share more genetic ancestry with a dark-skinned person from the Middle East than with a light-skinned person from East Asia. Skin color is just one trait, controlled by a small number of genes. The other 99.9% of your genome varies in ways that don't correspond to skin color. Traits like intelligence, personality, athletic ability, they're influenced by thousands of genes distributed throughout all populations. There's no genetic basis for thinking that skin color correlates with these traits. This is what genetics has revealed. Human populations differ in superficial ways, shaped by recent adaptations to local environments. But these differences don't create distinct categories. We're one species, one genetic family, with slightly different shades of the same pigment. Let your mind rest with this knowledge. The scientific evidence is clear and overwhelming. Skin color differences are real, they're genetic, they're adaptive. But they're also superficial, recent, and don't divide humanity into meaningful subgroups. We're far more similar than we are different. The human genome is like a book written in Africa, with recent footnotes added as some chapters were copied and carried to different parts of the world. The story is the same. Only the annotations differ. And even those annotations are minor, easily understood as adaptations to local conditions. You carry this genomic story inside every cell of your body. Your DNA links you to everyone who's ever lived, an unbroken chain stretching back through time. Skin color is just one visible marker of that chain, one small part of your genetic heritage. It tells you something about where your ancestors lived, what sun they experienced, how they survived. But it doesn't tell you who you are. That's a much bigger story, written in all your genes, shaped by your experiences, determined by your choices. Throughout history, humans have tried to explain skin color. Before science, before genetics, before evolution, people created stories to make sense of visible differences. Most of these stories were wrong. Some were harmfully wrong, used to justify terrible things. It's worth examining these misconceptions, understanding where they came from and why they persisted. One of the oldest ideas is that skin color results from sun exposure during life. The ancient Greeks thought this. The idea was that people in sunny regions became dark because they spent so much time in the sun, and this darkness was somehow passed to their children. This isn't entirely unreasonable as a pre-scientific theory. After all, individuals do tan when exposed to sun. Why wouldn't this tanning be inherited? But we know now that acquired characteristics aren't inherited. If you spend your whole life in the sun and become very tan, your children won't be born tan. They'll have whatever skin color their genes specify. Tanning is a temporary response to UV exposure, a protective mechanism, but it doesn't change your DNA or affect your offspring. Another persistent idea was that skin color reflected divine favor or moral worth. This appears in various cultures. Some societies believed that lighter skin indicated higher status, purity, or divine blessing. Other societies held dark skin in similar regard. These beliefs had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with social structures, power dynamics, and cultural values. The problem became acute with European colonialism. As Europeans explored and colonized the world, encountering people who looked different, they tried to explain these differences. Unfortunately, the explanations they developed were often based on prejudice rather than science. They created hierarchical racial categories, placing themselves at the top and others below, justifying exploitation and slavery with pseudoscientific theories about racial superiority. These theories claimed that skin color correlated with intelligence, civilization, morality, and worth. They claimed that races were fundamentally different, separate subspecies, or even separate species. They used measurements of skulls, faces, and bodies to argue for inherent differences in capability and character. None of this was real science. It was prejudice dressed up in scientific language. The measurements were selective, the interpretations biased, the conclusions predetermined. But these ideas had enormous influence. They shaped laws, justified atrocities, caused immeasurable harm. Even after evolution was discovered, these misconceptions persisted. Some people misunderstood evolution, thinking that if some populations were more evolved or advanced than others, they created linear models of human development, placing different populations at different stages. This is completely wrong. All modern humans are equally evolved. We've all been evolving for the same amount of time since we shared common ancestors. The truth, which science has painstakingly revealed, is that skin color is a simple adaptation to UV radiation. It says nothing about intelligence, worth, capability, or character. It's no more meaningful than eye color, hair texture, or any other superficial physical trait that varies between populations. Let's be clear about what the science shows. There are no biological races in humans. Race is a social construct, not a genetic reality. Yes, populations differ in certain traits. Yes, ancestry matters for some medical conditions. But these differences don't create discrete categories. They don't support the idea of separate races with inherent differences in capability. Every population is genetically diverse within itself. There's more genetic variation within Africa than in all non-African populations combined. Two random Africans are likely to be more genetically different from each other than a European is from an Asian. The genetic differences between populations are small, recent, and superficial. This doesn't mean we should be colorblind. Skin color is real. It has social meaning. It affects people's lives through discrimination and prejudice. But these are social problems, not biological realities. The biology tells us we're one species, closely related, fundamentally similar. Some people worry that acknowledging genetic differences in traits like skin color opens the door to racism. But the opposite is true. Understanding the biology of skin color undermines racism. It shows that skin color is a minor adaptation, recently evolved, with no connection to other traits. It shows that racial categories don't exist in nature. It shows that all humans are African under the skin. There's a beautiful irony here. For centuries, people used skin color to divide humanity. They created elaborate theories of racial difference. But science, investigating these differences carefully, discovered that they're superficial, that they're recent, that they unite us rather than divide us. Every human on Earth has African ancestors. Every human outside Africa descended from a single migration about 70,000 years ago. The differences between populations arose after that, as groups adapted to new environments. We're all cousins, all family, separated by only a few hundred generations. When you look at someone with different skin color, you're looking at a distant relative whose ancestors took a different path, lived under different skies, adapted to different light. That's all. Not an inferior. Not a superior. Just a fellow human whose genetic journey took a slightly different route before arriving at the present. This understanding should foster humility and compassion. None of us chose our skin color. We inherited it from ancestors who were responding to environmental pressures. It's arbitrary in the deepest sense. If your ancestors had migrated to different regions thousands of years ago, you'd look different. Skin color is contingent, dependent on accidents of history and geography. The misconceptions about skin color have caused tremendous suffering. They've been used to justify slavery, genocide, discrimination, oppression. Understanding the truth doesn't erase that history. But it does provide a foundation for moving forward. It shows us that the categories we created, the hierarchies we built, were never real. They were illusions, mistakes, harmful fictions. Science offers us a better story. A true story. A story where all humans are related, where differences are superficial, where adaptation to environment explains variation without implying superiority or inferiority. This story doesn't eliminate the challenges of prejudice and discrimination, but it removes any biological justification for them. As you settle deeper into rest, let go of old misconceptions. Let go of ideas about racial hierarchies or fundamental differences. We are one species, one family, painted in different shades by adaptation to light. That's the truth, simple and profound. Everything else is fiction, history to be learned from and overcome. Let's move forward in time now, from prehistoric evolution to recorded history. How have human societies perceived and responded to skin color differences? The answers are complex, varying across cultures and time periods. In ancient times, before widespread long-distance contact between populations, most people never encountered anyone who looked dramatically different from themselves. A person living in sub-Saharan Africa saw other dark-skinned people. A person living in Northern Europe saw other light-skinned people. Skin color wasn't a major category of social difference because there wasn't much variation to notice. This doesn't mean ancient societies were homogeneous. They distinguished between groups based on language, religion, customs, tribe, city-state. But these distinctions weren't primarily based on physical appearance. And ancient Greeks' main identity markers were their city-state and whether they spoke Greek. An ancient Egyptians' identity related to their role in the kingdom and their devotion to Egyptian gods. When ancient civilizations did encounter people with different skin colors, through trade or conquest, their reactions varied. Ancient Egyptian art shows awareness of different skin tones, depicting Nubians as darker and some foreigners as lighter. But Egyptian society wasn't strictly organized around skin color. Social status depended more on position in the kingdom's hierarchy. The Roman Empire included people from across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, a range of skin tones. Roman identity was about citizenship and culture, not appearance. A dark-skinned North African who spoke Latin and participated in Roman culture could rise to high positions, including emperor. Septimius Severus, who ruled from 193 to 211 CE, was of North African descent. Medieval societies in Europe, Asia, and Africa similarly organized around religion, class, and clan rather than skin color. A medieval European peasant had more in common with a peasant from another region than with a European noble. The major divide was class, not color. However, some societies did develop preferences for lighter skin, but usually within their own population rather than between different populations. In many Asian societies, lighter skin became associated with wealth and status because wealthy people could afford to stay indoors, away from the sun. Peasants who worked in fields developed darker, tan skin. Thus, within a population of generally similar skin tone, lighter individuals were perceived as higher status. This is different from modern racism. It's colorism, a preference for lighter shades within a population, often tied to class rather than ancestry. It's worth noting because it shows that skin color can become socially meaningful even without contact between different populations. The modern concept of race, tied strongly to skin color, emerged primarily during the European colonial period, roughly from the 1500s onward. As Europeans explored the world, colonized the Americas, and began the transatlantic slave trade, they needed to justify their actions. They developed increasingly rigid categories of race, linking skin color to supposed inherent differences in capability and worth. This reached its most developed form in the 1700s and 1800s, when European scientists created racial classification systems. They divided humanity into a few categories, typically based on geography and skin color, and ranked these categories hierarchically. These systems claimed to be scientific but were actually deeply influenced by prejudice and the economic interests of colonialism and slavery. The consequences were devastating. Racial theories justified the enslavement of Africans, the displacement and genocide of indigenous peoples, and the creation of colonial empires. They shaped laws, including those preventing intermarriage between races, denying rights based on race, and segregating societies. These ideas persisted well into the 20th century. In the United States, racial segregation was legal in many states until the 1960s. In South Africa, Apartheid lasted until the 1990s. Nazi Germany used racial theories to justify the Holocaust. The idea that skin color indicated fundamental differences between types of humans caused immense suffering. It's important to understand this history because its effects persist. Modern racism isn't based on ancient prejudices. It's based on relatively recent ideas that arose for specific historical reasons related to colonialism, slavery, and power. These ideas were never scientifically valid, but they became deeply embedded in laws, institutions, and cultures. The dismantling of these ideas has been gradual. The scientific consensus shifted in the 20th century as genetics revealed the truth about human variation. The civil rights movements of the mid-1900s challenged racist laws and practices. But changing laws is easier than changing attitudes, and changing attitudes is easier than changing the structural inequalities built up over centuries. Today, we live in a world still shaped by historical ideas about skin color, even as science has thoroughly debunked those ideas. We know that skin color is a minor adaptation to UV radiation. We know that it says nothing about intelligence or character. We know that all humans are closely related, but social attitudes and structures change slowly. This is why understanding the science matters. It's not just abstract knowledge. It's a foundation for addressing real-world problems. When you understand that skin color differences are recent, superficial, and adaptive, you can't justify prejudice based on those differences. When you understand that all humans are African under the skin, you can't claim fundamental differences between populations. History shows us how wrong we can be when we let prejudice guide our understanding. Ancient societies that never developed rigid racial categories remind us that these categories aren't natural or inevitable. They're constructed, created by humans for specific purposes, and they can be deconstructed. The journey from tribal societies to global civilization has been difficult. We've made mistakes. We've created harmful categories. We've hurt each other based on superficial differences. But we've also learned. Science has given us truth. History has given us perspective. We have the knowledge to do better. As you rest, perhaps on the edge of sleep, consider how much has changed and how much needs to change still. We know the truth about skin color now. We know it's adaptation, not essence. We know it's superficial, not profound. The challenge is making this knowledge matter in how we organize societies, how we treat each other, how we think about ourselves. The color of your skin tells a story about where your ancestors lived. It doesn't tell a story about who you are or what you're capable of. That's a story you write yourself. Let's imagine life in ancient Africa, where humans lived with the skin color evolution gave us first. Let's step into that world and experience it through the senses. You wake before dawn in a savanna landscape. The sky is deep blue-black, fading to purple at the eastern horizon. Stars are fading as the sun approaches. The air is cool now, the coolest it will be all day. You can hear insects, birds beginning their morning calls, the distant sound of water in a nearby stream. Your skin is dark brown, rich and beautiful in the gathering light. Everyone in your community has similar skin. Some slightly darker, some slightly lighter, but all within a range that reflects the ancient adaptation to this sunny land. You've never seen anyone who looks dramatically different. Why would you? Your people have lived here for countless generations. You step outside your dwelling, feeling dew on the grass beneath your feet. Other people are waking, beginning the day's activities. There's no sudden rush. Life moves with natural rhythms, shaped by daylight and darkness, heat and coolness, rain and drought. As the sun rises, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, you begin your daily work. Perhaps you're part of a group that will forage today, looking for edible plants, tubers, fruits. Or perhaps you'll hunt, tracking animals across the grassland. Or fish in the river. Or tend to crops if your community has begun farming. The sun climbs higher. Its heat increases. This is intense solar radiation, UV pouring down from an almost cloudless sky. But your skin is ready for it. The melanin in your epidermis absorbs the UV before it can penetrate deeply. You don't burn. You don't even think about sun protection because you're built for this. You work through the morning. The heat builds. By midday, it's hot enough that you seek shade. This is a time for rest, for conversation, for sitting under trees and escaping the most intense hours. No one works at noon if they can avoid it. The sun is too strong, even for those adapted to it. In the shade, your dark skin doesn't heat up as quickly as it might otherwise. Melanin not only protects against UV, it also helps dissipate heat. Your skin is efficient, optimized for this climate through thousands of years of evolution. You are, in the most literal sense, in the right place. This is where your ancestors evolved. This is where your body makes sense. The afternoon brings resumed activity. More foraging, more work, more of the endless tasks of survival. Finding food. Preparing food. Making tools. Maintaining shelters. Caring for children. Teaching skills. Telling stories. Your community is close-knit. Everyone knows everyone. There are elders who remember decades of history, who know which years had good rains and which years had drought. There are skilled hunters who can track an animal for miles and predict where it will go. There are women who know which plants are edible, which have medicinal properties, which can be woven into baskets or cord. Knowledge passes orally, from generation to generation. You learn to read the landscape from your parents and grandparents. You learned which stars guide you home, which animal signs mean water is near, which plants bloom before the rains come. This knowledge is survival. It's accumulated over thousands of years, refined by trial and error, stored in human memory. As evening approaches, the sun begins its descent. The heat softens. The light turns golden, then orange, then red. This is perhaps the most beautiful time of day, when the harsh brightness softens into gentleness. The sky becomes a palette of colors, each sunset unique, each evening a gift. Your community gathers for the evening meal. Food is shared. Stories are told. Children play while adults talk. There's laughter, disputes, gossip, problem-solving. All the social dynamics of human life happening around a fire, under a darkening sky. The fire is important, not just for cooking but for light, for warmth as the temperature drops, for protection against predators. Fire is one of humanity's oldest technologies, used for hundreds of thousands of years. Sitting around it, you're participating in a ritual older than modern humans, older than agriculture or cities or writing. As full darkness arrives, the stars emerge. In a world without artificial light, the night sky is spectacular. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a river of light. Constellations your people have named, whose stories you know, whose movements mark the seasons. You navigate by these stars. You know the year's rhythm by their positions. You might tell stories about those stars. About ancestors, about spirits, about the creation of the world. These stories are your culture's science, its history, its moral teachings. They explain why things are the way they are, how to live well, what matters in life. Eventually you sleep. The day's work has made you tired. You lie on a mat or furs, your family around you, the fire burning low. The night sounds surround you, crickets and distant animals, wind in the trees. You feel safe, part of a community, connected to this land and its rhythms. This was life for most of human history. Simple in material possessions but rich in knowledge, skills, relationships. Hard in many ways, with constant challenges of finding food, avoiding predators, surviving disease. But also beautiful, connected to nature, full of meaning found in family and community. Your dark skin was an unnoticed gift in this life. It protected you every day, allowing you to work under the sun, to survive in this landscape. You never thought about it because it was simply normal, the way every human you knew looked, the way humans were supposed to look. If you could speak to one of these ancient people, if you could tell them that someday their descendants would have different colored skin, they wouldn't understand. Why would skin color change? What purpose would that serve? Here, under the African sun, dark skin is perfect. But change was coming. Some of their descendants would leave this land, would walk into regions where the sun was different, where life required different adaptations. And over thousands of years, skin color would change, not because it needed to improve, but because it needed to match new circumstances. As you drift toward sleep, carry with you the image of that African community. They are your ancestors, all of our ancestors. They lived under bright sun with dark skin, perfectly adapted to their world. They were us, before the migrations, before the diversification. They were humans at our origin, and they were beautiful. Now let's travel forward in time and north in latitude. Let's experience life in a place where the sun is weak, where winter brings months of cold and darkness, where the adaptations required are completely different. You wake in what is now Northern Europe, but this is 15,000 years ago. The Ice Age is ending, but winter is still harsh, long, and dark. Your shelter is built of wood and animal hides, insulated against the cold. Fire burns constantly, keeping back the chill. Your skin is lighter than your distant African ancestors, though not yet as pale as modern Northern Europeans. The genetic changes for very light skin are still spreading through your population. Some people are lighter, some darker. You're in between, carrying some of the new variants but not all of them. The sun rises late, and even at midday, it stays low on the horizon. The light is different here, softer, more diffuse. It passes through more atmosphere before reaching you, filtering out much of the UV radiation. On cloudy days, which are frequent, the sun is barely visible. Winter days are short, maybe only 6 or 7 hours of dim daylight. Your people have adapted to this environment in many ways. You wear clothing year-round, heavy furs in winter, lighter skins in summer. You've learned to preserve food, smoking meat and fish, storing nuts and dried berries for the long months when fresh food is scarce. You've become experts at surviving cold, at finding shelter, at keeping fire burning. But your bodies are still adapting. The genetic changes for lighter skin provide a subtle advantage here. With limited UV radiation, lighter skin can produce vitamin D more efficiently. Over generations, this adds up. Children of lighter skin parents are slightly healthier on average, their bones slightly stronger, their immune systems slightly more robust. No one notices this advantage consciously. You don't think, "I'm glad my skin is light because it helps me make vitamin D." You just live, and those with the right adaptations are slightly more likely to survive and reproduce. That's how evolution works, through small advantages accumulating over time. The landscape here is different from Africa. Forests, rivers, rocky coasts. Animals are different too. Reindeer, mammoths, fish, seals. The plants are different. Berries, roots, nuts from trees that don't exist in Africa. Your people have learned this landscape over thousands of years since first arriving here. You know where to find food in each season, where animals migrate, where fish spawn. Winter is the hardest time. Food is scarce. Hunting is difficult in snow and cold. You rely on stored provisions and whatever game you can catch. The short days mean less time to work, less time to hunt and gather. The cold is relentless, sapping energy, making every task harder. But there's beauty in winter too. The landscape covered in snow, pristine and quiet. The rare clear nights when the northern lights dance across the sky, green and purple curtains of light that seem magical, mysterious. Your people have stories about these lights, explanations for what they are and what they mean. Spring brings relief. Days lengthen. The sun climbs higher. Snow melts. Rivers swell with runoff. Migrating animals return. Plants begin to grow. This is a time of renewal, of abundance after scarcity. You can feel your energy return, matching the returning sun. Summer is glorious but brief. Long days, nearly 20 hours of daylight at this latitude. The sun doesn't fully set, just dips below the horizon and quickly returns. Plants grow rapidly in the long light. Animals are everywhere, feeding, breeding. This is the time to gather food for the next winter, to prepare for the inevitable return of cold and darkness. Your skin responds to summer sun. Even light skin tans somewhat, producing more melanin as a temporary protective measure. By late summer, you're darker than you were in winter, though still nowhere near as dark as equatorial populations. This is your body's flexible response to changing UV levels throughout the year. Autumn brings preparation. Preserving meat, gathering nuts, checking shelters for winter readiness. Days shorten rapidly. The sun's arc across the sky drops lower each week. You can feel winter approaching, sense it in the cooling air and changing light. Life here requires different skills than life in Africa. You need to plan for the future more, storing food for months ahead. You need warm clothing, substantial shelters, constant fire. You need knowledge of seasonal patterns, understanding of when to hunt, when to gather, when to prepare. But you also need something else, something less tangible. You need the ability to endure darkness, cold, scarcity. You need the psychological strength to get through long winters when food is limited, when illness is common, when the sun barely rises. This is as much a part of adaptation as skin color. Your lighter skin is an advantage, helping you maintain vitamin D levels during the dark months. But it's not enough on its own. You also need a diet that provides some vitamin D, fatty fish, and animal organs. You need social bonds that help your community survive difficult times together. You need cultural knowledge passed down through generations about how to thrive in this harsh climate. Imagine a day in late winter. The sun rises around 9 a.m., barely climbs above the horizon, and sets by 3 p.m. For most of the day, the light is dim, twilight-like. The cold is intense. Snow covers everything. Your breath fogs in the air. You're wearing layers of fur, but you can still feel the chill. You go out to check snares, hoping to catch a hare or fox. The snow is deep, making walking difficult. Your hands and feet grow numb despite wrappings of fur. You long for warmth, for spring, for longer days. This is survival at its most basic, enduring harsh conditions, hoping you stored enough food to last until the growing season returns. But even in this hardship, there's community. Your group huddles together, sharing warmth, sharing stories, sharing what food you have. No one survives alone here. You need each other, rely on each other, find meaning in each other. The cold makes isolation deadly, so it forges strong social bonds. As you rest now, warm and comfortable, think about those ancient northern communities. They faced challenges your African ancestors never knew. They adapted, both culturally and biologically. Their skin lightened over generations, an evolutionary response to limited sun. They developed cultural practices, technologies, and social structures suited to their environment. They survived. They thrived in their own way. And they became your ancestors, if your family line passed through northern regions. The light skin of modern Europeans, East Asians in northern areas, is a testament to their adaptation, their resilience, their successful colonization of harsh environments. Neither they nor their African contemporaries were superior. They were just different, adapted to different places, facing different challenges with different solutions. Together, they represent human diversity, our species' remarkable ability to survive everywhere from equatorial forests to Arctic tundras. For most of human history, different populations lived separately. Once groups migrated to different continents, contact was limited. Populations in Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually the Americas developed independently, adapting to their local environments, creating distinct cultures and languages. This isolation wasn't absolute. There was always some gene flow along borders, some mixing in contact zones. But by and large, populations developed in their own regions for thousands of years. Skin color gradually diverged as different groups adapted to different UV levels. Then, relatively recently in human history, everything changed. Long-distance travel became easier. Explorers crossed oceans. Trade networks expanded. Empires rose and fell. Populations that had been separated for tens of thousands of years came back into contact. This reconnection accelerated dramatically in the last 500 years with European maritime exploration and colonialism. Suddenly, people from different continents were meeting, trading, fighting, and mixing. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, the full range of human variation in skin color and other traits came back together. These meetings weren't always peaceful. Often, they involved conquest, slavery, and exploitation. The history is painful and complex. But from a biological perspective, something interesting happened. Populations began exchanging genes again, mixing in ways they hadn't for thousands of years. When people from different populations have children together, those children inherit genes from both parents. Their skin color is typically intermediate, though the genetics are complex enough that sometimes children are darker or lighter than either parent. Over generations, in populations where mixing occurs regularly, you see a blending of genetic variants from different sources. This happened throughout history wherever populations met. In North Africa, mixing between Africans, Europeans, and Middle Eastern populations created a gradient of skin tones. In Central Asia, mixing between East Asian and European populations created unique combinations of features. In the Americas after European and African arrival, mixing created new populations with blended ancestry. Today, we live in a world more interconnected than ever. International migration is common. Intermarriage between people of different ancestries is increasingly normal in many societies. The genetic barriers between populations are breaking down. This has important implications. Genetic diversity is generally good for populations. Mixing brings together beneficial variants from different sources. Children of parents from different geographic ancestries often have robust health, a phenomenon called hybrid vigor, though it's subtle in humans. More importantly, mixing undermines racial categories. When populations blend, the boundaries between groups blur. If racial categories were real biological entities, mixing would be problematic, creating hybrids that don't fit neatly into categories. But since racial categories are social constructs, mixing simply reveals their arbitrariness. Consider someone with African, European, Asian, and Native American ancestry. What race are they? The question becomes meaningless. They're human, carrying genetic variants from multiple sources, representing the full diversity of our species. This is increasingly common, and it highlights how genetic variation doesn't respect the boundaries we've tried to create. Skin color in mixed populations can vary widely. Siblings from the same parents can have noticeably different skin tones because the genetics involve multiple genes that segregate independently. One sibling might inherit more variants for darker skin, another might inherit more variants for lighter skin. Both are equally valid expressions of their mixed ancestry. This genetic mixing is actually a return to an earlier state. When humans first left Africa, they were one population. Separation into distinct groups was temporary, an accident of geography and migration patterns. Now, through modern mobility and mixing, we're becoming one population again, though this time with greater genetic diversity than the original African population had. Some people worry about this mixing, believing it threatens distinct populations or cultures. But biologically, mixing is neutral or positive. It increases genetic diversity, reduces the risk of recessive genetic disorders, and produces healthy children. The concerns are cultural and social, not biological. Cultures do change when populations mix, that's true. Languages blend, traditions merge, new cultural forms emerge. But this has always happened. Culture is dynamic, constantly evolving. The mixing happening now is just the latest chapter in humanity's long cultural history. What's different now is the pace and scale. In the past, mixing happened gradually in border regions over generations. Now, it can happen in a single generation when people from different continents meet and marry in cosmopolitan cities. This rapid mixing is socially challenging but biologically unremarkable. From an evolutionary perspective, we might be entering a new phase. For the last 50,000 years, human populations have been diverging, accumulating different adaptations, developing distinct genetic profiles. Now, we're converging again, blending our differences back together. Will everyone eventually have the same intermediate skin color? Probably not, at least not soon. Selection pressures still exist. People living in sunny regions still benefit from darker skin. People in northern regions still benefit from lighter skin. As long as populations stay primarily in their current regions, skin color will remain varied. But in populations where mixing is common, where people don't stay in one region for many generations, you might see a gradual averaging of skin tones toward intermediate browns. This wouldn't be universal, but it might happen in cosmopolitan urban centers where mixing is most common. More importantly, the genetic linkage between ancestry and skin color will weaken. Currently, you can make rough guesses about someone's ancestry from their skin color. In the future, as mixing continues, that correlation will break down. Skin color will become less predictive of genetic background. This is already happening. In many countries, you'll meet people whose appearance doesn't match your expectations for their ancestry. Someone with a Spanish surname might look East Asian. Someone with an African name might have pale skin. The old correlations are dissolving. This confuses social categories but clarifies biological reality. Skin color is just one trait, variable, mixable, independent of most other genetic factors. As it detaches from ancestry through mixing, its biological meaning becomes clearer even as its social meaning becomes more complicated. Take a moment as you settle toward sleep to think about this. You might carry genetic variants from populations that were separated for thousands of years. Your DNA might be a blend of African, European, Asian, Native American, or other ancestries. Even if you think of yourself as belonging to one group, genetic testing often reveals more complex ancestry than expected. This is beautiful in its own way. You're a meeting point of different branches of the human family tree. Your genome represents paths that diverged tens of thousands of years ago and are now coming back together. You're literally a reunion of human diversity. The meeting of worlds, the reconnection of separated populations, is one of the most significant biological events in recent human history. It's creating a more genetically diverse, more interconnected human population. Our children and grandchildren will be even more mixed, even more diverse, carrying variants from across the globe. Skin color, that ancient adaptation to sunlight, will remain but perhaps with new meaning. Not as a marker of separate races or deep divisions, but as a beautiful visible reminder of human diversity, of our ability to adapt to different environments, of our shared heritage and recent reunion. Let's bring this all together now. Let's understand what the science of skin color evolution means for us today, living in the modern world, trying to make sense of human diversity. First, the science is clear. Skin color is an adaptation to UV radiation, shaped by natural selection over thousands of years. Dark skin evolved first, in Africa, as protection against intense sun. Light skin evolved later, in some populations, as an adaptation to low UV environments where vitamin D synthesis was challenging. This happened independently in different populations through different genetic changes. This means skin color tells us something real about ancestry. If someone has very dark skin, their recent ancestors probably came from tropical regions. If someone has very pale skin, their recent ancestors probably came from northern latitudes. Skin color is a marker of where people's ancestors lived and what sun they experienced. But skin color tells us nothing about intelligence, character, capability, or worth. These traits are influenced by thousands of genes distributed throughout all populations. There's no correlation between skin color and these complex traits. The genes that lighten or darken skin don't affect your brain, your personality, your potential. This should be obvious, but it's worth stating explicitly because historical prejudices run deep. Every scientific study of intelligence, personality, and other complex traits shows that variation within populations is much greater than average differences between populations. And when small average differences are found, they're explained by environmental factors like access to education and healthcare, not by genetics. In other words, if you took a baby of any ancestry and raised them in any environment, their outcome would depend on that environment, not their skin color. A baby with dark skin raised in a wealthy, educated family will have every advantage. A baby with light skin raised in poverty will face challenges. Skin color doesn't determine destiny. This has profound implications for how we think about social issues. Differences in outcomes between racial groups are not due to biological differences. They're due to social factors, historical injustices, systemic inequalities, and ongoing discrimination. Fixing these problems requires social and political change, not biological explanations or solutions. Understanding the evolution of skin color also reveals that racial categories are arbitrary. There's no clear biological boundary between black and white, or between any racial groups. Skin color varies continuously, gradually, with populations at every shade from very dark to very pale. Dividing this continuum into discrete categories is a social choice, not a biological reality. Different societies have drawn these boundaries differently. In the United States, the one-drop rule historically classified anyone with any African ancestry as black. In Brazil, racial categories are more fluid, with many intermediate categories. In South Africa under apartheid, Japanese people were classified as white for economic reasons. These inconsistencies show that racial categories are social constructs, variable across time and place. Science shows us that the categories we've created don't correspond to deep genetic divisions. All humans are closely related. The genetic differences between populations are small, recent, and superficial. We're one species, one family, with slightly different shades of the same pigment. This doesn't mean race has no social reality. Race is very real as a social category. It affects people's lives through discrimination, privilege, and identity. But it's not biological. It's not genetic. It's a social fact, not a natural one. Understanding this distinction is crucial. We can acknowledge that race is socially important while recognizing that it's biologically meaningless. We can work to address racial inequalities while understanding that these inequalities have nothing to do with biological differences. The science of skin color evolution also reminds us of our shared African heritage. Every human alive today has ancestors who lived in Africa with dark skin. Some of those ancestors left Africa and their descendants evolved lighter skin. But we all trace back to the same origin, the same beginning. This is more than poetic. It's genetically demonstrable. Mitochondrial DNA, inherited from mothers, and Y chromosome DNA, inherited from fathers, both point to African origins. The most genetically diverse populations are in Africa. The least diverse are populations furthest from Africa. This is exactly what you'd expect if everyone originated in Africa and some populations went through genetic bottlenecks as they migrated. So when you look at someone with different skin color, you're looking at a cousin. Distant, separated by hundreds or thousands of generations. But family nonetheless. Their ancestors and your ancestors shared a common home in Africa tens of thousands of years ago. Then some left, some stayed, and their bodies adapted to different environments. This knowledge should foster humility. None of us chose our skin color. None of us earned it or deserved it. It's an accident of birth, determined by where our ancestors happened to live and what evolutionary pressures they happened to face. It's arbitrary in the deepest sense. And yet, skin color has been made socially significant through historical processes. It has been used to justify terrible things. It continues to affect people's opportunities and experiences. This is a tragedy, a failure to understand our own biology, a choice to create divisions where nature created only variation. The path forward requires both scientific understanding and social action. We need to understand that racial differences are superficial, recent, and adaptive. We need to teach this in schools, communicate it clearly, make it common knowledge. But we also need to address the social realities of racism, the systems and structures built on false beliefs about biological race. This is challenging work. Changing minds is hard. Changing societies is harder. But knowledge is a foundation. When people understand that skin color is just an adaptation to sunlight, it becomes harder to justify prejudice based on skin color. When people understand that all humans are African under the skin, it becomes harder to claim fundamental differences between groups. You, reading this now or listening to these words, carry this knowledge. You understand something important about human biology and human history. You know that skin color is both meaningful as an adaptation and a social category, and meaningless as a basis for judging worth or capability. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. You can share it, teach it, use it to challenge prejudice when you encounter it. You can let it inform how you think about yourself and others. You can let it give you perspective on human diversity, seeing it as beautiful variation rather than threatening difference. As you drift toward sleep, let this knowledge settle into your understanding. We are one species. We share one origin. Our differences are recent, superficial, and adaptive. Under the skin, we're all African. Under the skin, we're all family. Under the skin, we're all human. The color of someone's skin tells you about where their ancestors lived. It tells you nothing about who they are or what they're capable of. Remember this. Live this. Share this. This is what science teaches us. This is what evolution reveals. This is what the evidence shows, clearly and overwhelmingly. We are one species, painted in different shades by adaptation to light, but united by our shared heritage and common humanity. We've traveled a long way together tonight. From the origins of humanity in Africa 2 million years ago, through the great migrations out of Africa, across the evolution of light skin in northern populations, into the genetic evidence, debunking of misconceptions, and finally to the implications for today. The story of skin color is, ultimately, a simple one. Humans evolved dark skin as protection against intense African sun. Some humans migrated to regions with less sun. Over thousands of years, some of these populations evolved lighter skin to facilitate vitamin D production. This happened independently in different groups, through different genetic changes, in response to similar environmental pressures. That's it. That's the story. An adaptation to sunlight. A response to different amounts of UV radiation at different latitudes. Natural selection acting on random genetic variation to produce the diverse array of skin tones we see today. And yet, from this simple story, so much complexity emerges. Human societies have made skin color meaningful in ways that have nothing to do with its biological function. We've created categories, hierarchies, systems of power based on skin color. We've caused tremendous suffering by failing to understand that skin color is superficial. Science offers us clarity. It shows us what skin color is and isn't. It shows us how it evolved and what it means. It shows us that beneath the superficial variation, we're all the same. All human. All related. All African at our core. This understanding doesn't erase history. It doesn't undo the harm caused by racism. It doesn't automatically create equality or justice. But it removes any scientific justification for prejudice. It shows that racial hierarchies are built on sand, on misunderstanding, on fiction. As you lie there now, perhaps on the edge of sleep, let's return to where we started. Look at your hand. Look at your skin. Whatever color it is, it's telling you a story. A story about where your ancestors lived, what sun they experienced, how they adapted to survive. Your skin color is a gift from your ancestors. They survived long enough to reproduce. They passed their genes forward through time. They adapted to their environment, whether that meant keeping dark skin in sunny regions or developing light skin in northern latitudes. They solved the vitamin D paradox in the way that worked for their specific circumstances. And now you carry that solution with you. Your skin color is optimized for a certain amount of UV radiation. If you live in the region your ancestors came from, your skin is probably well suited to the local sun. If you've moved to a different region, your skin might be mismatched to the environment, requiring you to be careful about sun exposure or vitamin D intake. But your skin color doesn't define you. It's just one trait among thousands, determined by a handful of genes out of 20,000. The vast majority of your genome is identical to every other human's genome. The things that make you unique as an individual, your thoughts, your talents, your personality, they're determined by a complex interplay of genes and environment that has nothing to do with skin color. You are part of an unbroken chain of life stretching back 4 billion years. More recently, you're part of a human lineage stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Your ancestors survived ice ages and droughts, plagues and famines, predators and rivals. They hunted and gathered, farmed and built, loved and raised children, all so that eventually you could exist. Your skin color is one small part of that inheritance. One visible marker of where your lineage traveled, what conditions it faced, how it adapted. But it's not the most important part. The most important part is that you're here. You're alive. You're conscious. You're part of humanity's ongoing story. The future of skin color is uncertain. As populations mix, as people move across the globe, as technology allows us to modify our sun exposure and supplement our vitamin D, the selective pressures that created variation in skin color are weakening. Perhaps in thousands of years, skin color will average toward intermediate browns. Perhaps technology will make vitamin D synthesis irrelevant, removing selection entirely. Perhaps we'll remain diverse, maintaining variation even as populations mix. Whatever happens, one thing is certain. We'll remain one species. The categories we've created based on skin color will fade as their biological basis is more widely understood. The prejudices built on those categories will eventually crumble, though perhaps not as quickly as we'd like. We'll come to see our diversity as beautiful, as evidence of human adaptability, as proof that we can survive anywhere. If you've drifted off to sleep during this journey, that's perfect. You've learned what you needed to learn. The knowledge is there, absorbed, ready to be recalled when relevant. If you're still awake, let sleep come naturally. There's no need to fight it. This story can carry you into rest. Dream of African savannas, of Ice Age Europe, of migrations and adaptations. Dream of your ancestors, wherever they lived, however they looked, all doing their best to survive and thrive. Dream of a future where skin color is celebrated as beautiful diversity rather than used as a basis for division. We are all children of Africa, all children of the sun. Our skin remembers where we came from and where our ancestors traveled. But our hearts, our minds, our souls, they transcend skin color. They make us human, make us one, make us family. Let this truth settle into you as sleep approaches. One species, many shades, all beautiful, all human, all connected through time and evolution and shared ancestry. Thank you for taking this journey through time. Thank you for learning this story. Thank you for being part of humanity's ongoing adventure. Rest now. Sleep well. And remember, when you wake, that everyone you meet is your distant cousin, carrying their own ancestral journey in their skin, their eyes, their face. We are one. We have always been one. And we will always be one, no matter how many shades of human there are. Good night.